Okay, good evening, Fide Master Adegboyega. I'm really, really happy because it's a privilege to be able to interview you like this. So far, can you please tell us how your games, your tournaments have been since yesterday?
Well, the tournament is getting progressively harder. It's still not ultimately tough yet, but I assume that it's going to get harder as we go along. I mean, we've had some admin fall already, but one will have to just prepare.
Yeah, of course. This today, you played two games, and both games were with lower rated players. So, which one would you say was tougher, and which one would you like us to look into for analysis sake for this?
Oh, okay. Well, the first game was a bit easier as my opponent came extremely late. He had only 5 minutes left to finish the game. So the position didn't really come out as a great game because he made opening inaccuracies, which were a result of the time trouble, and conversion wasn't much of a problem. So the second game could be more worthy of analysis. Yes.
I believe we have the second game open. That is against let me see.
Oshita Lulu Ashiji.
Yeah, so we have it open here. So, for the sake of, people watching and followers, so they want to learn one or
Okay.
two things. So an analysis would be great. So
Okay.
you can use the forward button to scroll forward to the game.
May I use this? Is this
Okay,
possible?
yeah, to use that, so you have to play exactly.
Okay. Okay. Well, the game started off as a reti, which is quite common these days. So both sides were quite content to try and develop their pieces quietly. So white fianchettos is dark squared bishop, and black tries to get some grip on the center too. So the main fight was about the e5 square right now. I mean, so black is trying to get a pawn on e5 for central presence, but white will try his best to try and prevent this.
It looked more like the player prepared for you this particular line, the way he just went directly into this deviation.
I am not too sure about preparations. Incidentally, I mean, Shiji is one of my players when I was coaching the Ogun State team. So it's not like he doesn't really know me. So, but we've never really had any tournament play before. We've had a lot of training sessions, but never play. But I think maybe this could have also influenced his style of play because initially I felt maybe we were in for a very long, slow battle. But as the game progressed, it showed that he was just going to, well, he came into the game with the strategy of holding, just holding and then reducing material at every given chance.
More like someone trying to play for draw.
At least basically hold well because well, equality is not necessarily draw. A game could be equal but not drawn. So at this point, black is already threatening to push e5 and get some kind of equality going. The good response here will be for white to. Oh, can I? Is there the analysis mode on? Is analysis mode on? Okay, so the way to go would have been to be able to play knight e5 here and then try and block black's play. But right now, because of the king's position, the weakness along this diagonal, black could get some reasonable play. I mean, for example, knight takes e5, pawn takes e5, bishop b4, bishop c3, and then knight e4 gives black already a good game as it was. So I mean, he's already equal enough for the black player. So this is not so horrible. So he chose to play castle instead. I mean, that's still logical. So I decided to push e5, but first, before getting e5 in, probably exchange in the center first. Normally, I don't like this kind of play. I mean, the exchanges, but I've come to run into a lot of trouble, sometimes having to play with the IQP, which is not really in my style. I really don't like having to be forced to attack. I like to, if I'm going to attack, it has to be my own volition, not because the position forces me to. Yeah. So this c4, bishop c4, then e5, and the main idea now is that if if white doesn't capture, then black will get e4 in, and so here white took, which I don't think was the best decision. I felt a better move might have been knight to d2, trying to provoke e4, then play knight g5 with a double attack on e4 and f7, castle, and then queen c2 puts the pawn in a very awkward position. Rook e8 can't defend because of f7. Knight b6 just drops the pawn immediately. So that I felt was a try, but because my opponent was coming in with an exchange all approach in the first place, so this will not give him the chance to be able to look at such ideas. So pawn takes e5, which is just the kind of approach that he wants, just exchange of everything. So he exchanges off all the pieces. Now we have a typical French endgame. This is a position that you get a lot from the French defense, but with colors reversed. I mean, if black were white, you could get a lot of this from the French. It's a position that I play myself as white, but as black playing the French. I play a lot of this from the Rubinstein, and I get a lot of this kind of positions. So now the thing is that everybody is getting what they want. I want a position that I am not taking much of a risk and I could play, and he wants a position where things are clear and he's not risking much too. So it's just a question of arranging our trumps. He's got a majority in the center. I've got a majority on the queen side. So, and once we're dealing with majorities, whoever manages to roll their majority would always take the day. So if he could roll his majority, maybe get a pawn to e5, kick this knight away, then he'll probably be able to launch an attack and probably win the game. But if not, the end games will usually just favor me. So here, of course, I have to castle. Can't stay in the center for too long anymore. So knight f3, queen e7, queen c2, bishop g4. So the idea is just to tickle the knight a bit and try and get it to a more awkward square. So he goes knight d4, c5, knight f5, queen e5. So the queen manages to get back the central square, and it essentially maintained that square till the game ended. Knight g3, rook d8. So here, h3, bishop d7, and then I played bishop c6, which I felt was a bit of an inaccuracy. I could or should just play g6 here. So with g6, just the pawn essentially just restricts the knight, just restricts it. The knight has no forward moves anymore, so the only way is to go back.
So if bishop c6 here is an inaccuracy, I guess, because since that seems like the only logical move or logical reason for the bishop coming to d7 in the first place, so that makes the bishop d7 itself the first inaccuracy.
No, bishop d7 is okay. The idea is we're going to play bishop d7. We're playing the pawn to, we're playing the bishop to c6. We're playing the pawn to g6. Both these moves still happened in the game, but the problem with bishop c6 immediately is that black could just try, white could try for queen f5. This forces the queen to take up a more awkward square than it has, and then you could even try moves like queen g5, and by the time g6 comes, you could now, yes, continue. Although I also worked this out during the game, that I could just play queen e4 here, and I'm relatively okay. So maybe knight h6, king g7, and then f3. So in this position, I mean, I don't even know. I think white is just clearly better, because the queen really has no good squares. E7 is now taboo because of knight f5. The queen probably has to choose a square like c2, and then f7 is hanging, everything is hanging. So that was just so that's what I meant by the being an inaccuracy. So I could, and I wouldn't even want to trade queens there, getting the knight to f5, weakness on e7 and stuff. So that was what I thought that's why it's just an inaccuracy. I was still going to play this g6 setup, so it was just best to play it with the bishop still on d7 while it's covering f5. Yeah. So rook takes d8. White just follows through with his general strategy, exchange of everything, but that's just not it's not the absolute best idea. An equal position is not necessarily a drawn position. Even a drawn position may not necessarily be dead drawn. I mean, you could be equal, it could be drawn, but even there are so many drawn positions that you could still win with. So now we've exchanged off all the pieces that could be forced off, more or less.
And now you have more active pieces.
If you take a look at all the activity of every single piece right now, I mean, the bishop on c6, well, is equal to the bishop on c4, maybe slightly better, but that's because I think this is just equal. They are equal. The knight on f6 is slightly better than the knight on. The queen on d1 is slightly worse than the queen on e5. So the piece that is the main thing right now is the king, and probably try and get the knight to a more awkward square. So g6, h5, and kicking the knight away. a4, well, at least to try and get some stability for the knight. Maybe that's not a bad idea. I had considered also maybe I could just go with the immediate b5 once my king is safer. Yeah, I considered even going immediately, just retreat to block the check, but I didn't want to go into those too much wahala. So just a4, king g7, queen d3. So I mean, I got a good diagonal. White has a file, but I can improve, and he has to find a way to improve. So h5. So the idea now is that I hope that if I could make some advance, white needed to say play his own majority. f4 is the way to go. I considered maybe stopping f4 with queen g5 here, but I didn't like the idea of the queen coming to c6. It looked very, very, yeah, it looked awkward for me. I couldn't find maybe it's still okay. I mean, h5 here, maybe it's still okay, but I just didn't like the pin on the.
Although you can't really do much with it anyways, because after h5, this is a major threat.
Yes, it is, but it could say play bishop b5. Now I have to do something myself. Could play bishop b5, and the pin is just awkward for me. So I felt moving my queen from a more active square just to prevent e5 might not make the most sense. And besides, if e5 comes, I could just try and hold the e4 square, then just switch gears and just hold the e4 square. So h4, knight e2. Before the pawn gets there, the knight decides to move away on its own volition. So if his knight leaves, my knight takes up a better position, which now means my knight is now even superior to his knight. So now with f3, I liked this a bit. I liked it a bit. Although the knight has to leave an advanced position on the e4 square, but more pawns are landing up on the light squares, which makes his bishop going to be much worse, and my bishop is going to have a lot of targets eventually. So I was really liking this. While is maybe he had calculated. I also calculated this line with check, king h2, knight f2, with queen c3, knight c3, and the knight has no way out. So king g3 or king g1 next just picks it up. Knight just gets picked up. So knight d6 was the way to go. Now this might look like a retreat, but in positions like in the Catalan, when white gets a knight to d3, such pieces can be very, 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 very active. They do a lot of work on those kind of squares, defensive and almost ready to switch into the attack on a moment's notice. So e4, I didn't like this very much because it just gives black something to nibble on with f5. No, it just gives something to nibble on, and then the d4, the dark squares just weakens more. So maybe king f2, but maybe I'll just play h4 in that wise and just clamp down. Although maybe king f2, I'll probably still play f5 and still try and clamp down on those squares. Then take control of the light squares, take control of the dark squares. Maybe follow up with h4, and then eventually start thinking about what to do with this with my own queenside majority. So my idea now is just to hold his own majority and then work on my own. So f5, pawn takes, knight takes, and black is just much better. Queen c3, still with the same idea of liquidating, but king f6 means if you're going to liquidate, at least do it with giving me a better king. So tries to improve his king. G5 to stop f4 and any try to control for the e5 square. So a much better king, a much better knight, a better bishop now. So I mean, even the pawns have better quality. So I mean, black has to be winning. The majority has actually been held up by this minority attack, because if you try for say g4 to kick the knight, I could just exchange, g4, pawn takes pawn, knight d4, knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, king g3 to play for h4, bishop e4 just wins in one, h4, pawn takes, king takes, pawn push, pawn push, pawn push, bishop e2, bishop c2. It's just a simple win. So white goes knight g3 with the idea of liquidating. So the knight retreats, and now the general variation that I was looking at was knight takes, takes, and then this is just with this h pawn, the knight is too far away to do anything. Exactly, that's the idea. And a bishop on c2 say could support the pawn moving here and block his own pawn. A knight has to choose either you're going to block or you're going to support. But with it, so it's clearly winning here. So I h4, knight back, and this is it gives up a pawn. The idea he thinks is that the threat of knight g6 and knight d3 and would force some concessions. I could actually just play a move like bishop g6, win another pawn, and then go into a race, but I felt there's no point. So I went bishop c2, covering the entire diagonal. So the knight really has no moves, more or less. So it had to go back to where it's coming from. And then bishop to f5. Then the bishop reroutes. So I just got a nice idea here that if I could get my bishop on this diagonal, either on h3 or f3, I could get it to f1, and then once I exchange the knight, the end game is simply winning. So sample line, and so that's just the end. So it's just easy. Once the okay, I played king g6 here, actually not king e5. So a sample line will be king d5 and then a and then a5. You know, king e4 just loses to b6, and then king goes in, and the pawn just rushes forward, and it's two clear moves away. It's two clear moves to queening. Oops, I mean, this is just an easy win anyway. Okay, so
So I guess you say like this is just as a result of when going into a game with a much. I mean, this is definitely a case of much stronger opponents, and you just have the idea of okay, maybe if I finish with a draw, it's fine. Or maybe I don't know how I'm going to do the magic, but let me just. So probably this is going to serve as a lesson to the particular player and others that even when you're going against a way stronger opponent, try as much as possible to prepare your mind for the best.
yeah, the
Don't hope for the worst.
yes, the best way is to get the best pieces on the board. So if you get the better pieces than your opponent, you're going to do well. Even if you're going to play for a draw eventually, it's better to do it with better pieces. If your pieces are better, your opponent is going to be more willing to accede to a draw. So, but taking up inferior pieces by just exchanging off some, it's not going to get the result that you need. So you must just take care of every single one of your piece. If you, of course, unfortunately with chess, you have only one move at a time.
Oh, yeah.
You have only one move at a time. So whichever one that you could at least work on at that moment, you feel okay, this is the worst piece right now that you could improve, just improve it. The better it gets. And if you feel like okay, this piece is not as good as my opponent's piece, then exchange it by all means. But if your piece is better than your opponent, or your piece is doing a good job, why do you want to exchange it? It's not going to, nobody is going to be able to just kill you by magic. It's chess, there's no magic.
So I asked I am Olakpe a question yesterday, so I'm going to ask you from the side of the female players now.
Okay.
So who do you think, considering we have we have the Nigerian, probably at least 60% of Nigerian top 10 female in this tournament, and with the kind of pairing that surfaced this morning, with all the ladies playing the strongman, the masters. So who do you think, or what would be a prediction to the first or the last, the winner of the female category as well as second and third? How would you favorite that?
It was quite an interesting matchup today between Paps and Stuffings. I mean, with the male national champion and the female national champion, I think, yeah, I mean, it was quite a match. I was watching the game as it progressed, and I was like, wow, these ladies are really pulling some strong stunts, because, I mean, she held the position and played very, very nicely. In fact, I felt she had a great position at a point, but once the game started developing tactically, she lost her way. Now, there are quite a number of strong ladies here. I think presently, Mrs.
Ashrafim is around.
Yeah,
Samson Peace is around.
it's a lot. And unfortunately, because it's an open tournament, things are going to. I mean, it's not in the hands of the ladies now. It's not about the strength of the ladies. Yes, things are going to get awkward. So it's just a question of the luck with it. Your luck with the draws. Your luck with the draws sometimes will just be the main thing. So really, to say this is the person that will win, I can't stick my neck out to say that, but I can just say whoever gets luckiest with the pairings, that is just going to be the winner.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. I really
You're
appreciate
welcome. All right, cheers.
it.
Thank
I wish
you.
a great tournament.
Yeah, thanks.